The galaxy had grown used to certain patterns. Every time a new summit or diplomatic meeting was scheduled, representatives from every species arrived with their usual entourage. The air shimmered with tension, suits and uniforms gleaming with metallic plates, energy weapons holstered or strapped to their sides. Each species had its own idea of what a guard should look like. Some were massive, towering beings with thick scales and claws that could tear through metal. Others were nimble, with sharp instincts and weapons that could disable an entire room in seconds. Diplomats depended on these guards for survival, and the galaxy assumed they were an unspoken necessity. But humans did something entirely different. On the day of the latest summit, whispers spread across the grand hall before the human delegation even stepped into view. Delegates nudged each other, murmuring questions that were more like confessions of disbelief. Are they really unarmed? One Valorian ambassador asked quietly. Another shook its head, its 3 eyes blinking rapidly. I've never seen anything like this. Every species sends guards fully armed. It's standard protocol. Why would humans ignore it? The humans walked calmly. Their suits were simple, designed for comfort and movement rather than intimidation. There were no energy rifles slung across their backs, no shimmering shields, no gauntlets bristling with sharp edges. Yet, despite the absence of weapons, there was something undeniably powerful about them. It wasn't obvious at first, but it was there, a confidence, a stillness, a sense of presence that made the most battle-hardened alien soldiers hesitate, even if only for a fraction of a second. The first impression could have been mistaken for carelessness or arrogance. But it wasn't. The humans had long ago made a deliberate choice to send their guards unarmed. And the reason went far deeper than anyone present could imagine. Inside the human delegation, the guards moved in a quiet rhythm. They spoke to each other in short, precise sentences, their eyes scanning the room without ever seeming panicked or rushed. They knew every exit, every line of sight, every potential weak point in the hall. It was the kind of awareness that could only come from years of training, not training with weapons, but with something far more subtle and dangerous, the ability to predict and influence the behavior of others. As the humans walked past the alien guards, several of the latter instinctively reached for their weapons. A subtle ripple of alarm ran through the room, like a sudden chill in the air. This was how different the humans were from every other species. No one had prepared for it. It wasn't just that they were unarmed. It was the confidence they carried while remaining so. The aliens felt exposed, almost naked in comparison. Among the diplomats, the discussions were hushed but urgent. Many argued that the humans were either naive or dangerously overconfident. Others believed it was a form of bluff, a test to see if the other species would overreact. But even those who doubted the humans couldn't ignore the calm that seemed to radiate from them. There was no hesitation, no panic, no flinching. Just quiet assurance. The summit began without incident, but the whispers never stopped. Alien delegates kept stealing glances at the humans, comparing them to their own armed guards. The differences were stark. Every other species relied on the presence of weapons to assert dominance, to provide security, to create a sense of order. Humans relied on something else entirely: discipline, intuition, and a deep understanding of other beings. One of the alien ambassadors finally broke the silence, leaning toward a colleague and speaking in a low, urgent tone. "We must learn their secret," it said. "No species has ever come here unarmed. If they are truly this confident, it suggests they have something we do not understand." That question hung in the air like a shadow. What could a species do without weapons that would make them safer than all others? What kind of power could exist without physical force? The answer, of course, was something humans had learned long ago. History was full of stories of conflict triggered by misunderstandings, Escalations caused by the very presence of weapons meant to keep the peace. In their earliest encounters with alien civilizations, human diplomats had noticed a pattern. Whenever humans brought weapons, the other species reacted with fear, suspicion, and sometimes violence. A simple show of force often led to chaos. Even defensive measures could spark wars unintentionally. Over centuries, humans adapted. They realized that the most effective form of protection was not to match force with force, but to neutralize the need for it entirely. The unarmed guards were the result of that adaptation. They were trained to de-escalate situations before they could escalate, to predict threats before they appeared, to influence the minds and behaviors of those around them without ever firing a shot. Every human diplomatic guard was effectively a walking deterrent, not through weapons, but through skill, discipline, and confidence. As the summit continued, the aliens began to notice more subtle details. The humans moved in perfect coordination, forming small protective formations around their diplomats without anyone noticing the structure at first. They positioned themselves in such a way that no one could approach the delegates unnoticed. Their eyes constantly scanned, yet they never appeared anxious or tense. Even when an aggressive alien delegate made a sudden move, the humans were already prepared, calmly redirecting the interaction without confrontation. It was mesmerizing. Alien guards, who had spent years preparing for combat scenarios, were caught off guard by the humans' ability to maintain control without weapons. For the first time, some began to wonder if there was a form of strength greater than brute force. The idea was both frightening and fascinating. Outside the summit hall, rumors spread quickly. Word reached other embassies and governments that humans had arrived unarmed and that nothing had gone wrong. No incidents. No threats realized. Just calm, orderly, precise behavior that prevented any potential conflict from escalating. Those who had been skeptical were forced to reconsider. Some alien leaders convened secret meetings to discuss what they had witnessed. Could humans be trusted to remain unarmed in a galaxy filled with danger? Or was there some hidden capability, some unknown advantage that gave them confidence? These questions fueled countless debates and analyses. Some even suggested espionage or concealed weapons, though no evidence ever supported those theories. Meanwhile, inside the human delegation, life was simple and disciplined. The guards ate, rested, and moved as a team, always aware of their surroundings. Their diplomats conducted meetings, negotiated treaties, and shared ideas, all under the watchful, yet invisible, protection of the unarmed humans. The balance was perfect. The humans had achieved what few others could: security without intimidation, power without aggression. By the time the summit concluded, the galaxy had begun to realize that humans did not play by the usual rules. They had found a way to survive and even thrive without resorting to force. Other species could not fully comprehend it, but they respected it, cautiously at first, then with growing admiration. As the human delegation departed, whispers followed them through the halls. Questions that had no easy answers lingered in the minds of every observer. Why did humans arrive unarmed? How could they ensure the safety of their diplomats without weapons? And most unsettling of all, what else were humans capable of if they could project such influence and control without ever drawing a weapon? The galaxy had witnessed something extraordinary that day. It was not the humans themselves that were remarkable. It was the philosophy they carried, the discipline they embodied, and the lesson they taught every species present. Sometimes the greatest power was not in the weapons you held, but in the confidence to never need them. And so, even as the summit ended and the delegates returned to their homeworlds, the story of the unarmed human guards spread like wildfire. Scholars debated it, strategists studied it, and politicians feared it. The humans had arrived quietly, without threat or fanfare, yet they left an impression stronger than any weapon could ever make. They had changed the way the galaxy thought about diplomacy, about security, and about the nature of power itself. The first part of this revelation was complete. The galaxy had noticed the humans, and the questions they raised would echo for generations. But what remained hidden, even from the most perceptive observers, was the true depth of human capability. That story was only just beginning. The Valorian Summit had been one of the most anticipated diplomatic meetings in decades. Delegates from dozens of star systems had gathered on Valoria Prime, a world known for its massive glass spires and magnetic skies that shimmered in shifting colors. For weeks, speculation had swirled about what would happen when humans arrived. And when they did, unarmed as always, the galaxy noticed that at first, it seemed like nothing unusual would happen. Discussions proceeded in the Grand Hall, with representatives debating trade routes, border disputes, and interstellar resource management. But tension was never far from the surface. Many species were aggressive negotiators, their customs built on dominance and intimidation. A single misstep could spark conflict. That was why armed guards were considered essential. The humans, however, did not rely on intimidation. They relied on something far more subtle: presence. Their diplomats spoke calmly and clearly, their guards moving with quiet precision around them. There were no weapons, no shields, no aggressive gestures. Yet every alien in the room instinctively knew that these humans were prepared for anything. It was impossible to explain in words, but it could be felt in the air, a quiet assurance that demanded attention. The first real test of this approach came unexpectedly. During a break between sessions, a small group of Valorian radicals attempted to breach the human delegation's private chambers. They were heavily armed, determined to make a point, and convinced that the humans' lack of defense made them easy targets. The moment was tense. Every other species' guards would have fired immediately, creating chaos in the hall and risking countless lives. But the humans did something astonishing. They moved forward, completely unarmed, yet with complete confidence. They did not charge. They did not raise their voices. They simply stepped in front of the intruders, forming a calm, unbroken line. The radicals hesitated. They expected fear, panic, or at least resistance. Instead, they found themselves facing humans who looked at them steadily, without aggression, without weakness. The psychological effect was immediate. The radicals' anger faltered, replaced by confusion. Something about the humans disrupted their expectations. They were trained for confrontation, but confrontation did not behave the way they had imagined. Within moments, other delegates arrived, and the situation was contained without a single shot fired. No alarms blared. No energy shields activated. Yet the human diplomats and their unarmed guards had neutralized a dangerous threat in a way that left the observers in awe. Alien leaders whispered among themselves, struggling to understand what they had just witnessed. What are they? One elder asked, his voice barely audible. How can they be so calm, so untouchable, without any weapons? The answer lay in years of training, philosophy, and discipline. Humans had studied conflict for generations. They understood that violence often escalated more quickly than logic could intervene. They had learned to predict the behavior of others by reading subtle signs, shifts in posture, changes in tone, flickers of emotion in the eyes. They had developed techniques to influence situations subtly, redirecting aggression without confrontation. Their unarmed guards were trained not to fight with weapons, but to prevent the need for weapons in the first place. It was not magic, and it was not luck. It was a form of mastery that the galaxy had rarely seen. Humans had discovered that restraint could be more powerful than force, and patience more effective than speed. Their guards were experts in negotiation without words, in control without dominance. Even the most aggressive alien delegates found themselves pausing, reconsidering their moves. When faced with humans who exuded calm authority. As the summit continued, stories of the incident began to circulate. Some delegates were skeptical, thinking it was luck or a trick. Others watched more closely, trying to discern the method behind the humans' behavior. What they began to notice was subtle but undeniable. Humans moved in patterns that anticipated potential threats before they materialized. Their presence alone shifted the energy in the room. Alien negotiators who attempted intimidation found that their usual tactics were ineffective. Discussions remained civil, even with contentious topics on the table. The humans themselves did not boast or claim superiority. They acted with quiet purpose, aware of their surroundings and attentive to the needs of their diplomats. They were disciplined, but not rigid. They adapted to the situation with a fluidity that alien observers found fascinating. Even those trained for combat could not predict how the humans would respond to each challenge, because the humans did not rely on predictable aggression. They relied on understanding, anticipation, and presence. Outside the summit hall, the whispers grew louder. Alien scholars speculated on the human approach, analyzing patterns, reviewing previous incidents, and debating whether there could be some hidden technology or secret weapon. No evidence was ever found. What the humans relied on could not be measured by scanners or detected by sensors. It existed in their minds, their training, and their understanding of others. Meanwhile, within the summit, the human guards continued to demonstrate subtle mastery. When an alien diplomat accidentally dropped an important data device, a human guard moved forward instantly, catching it with calm precision before it hit the floor. When a sudden power fluctuation caused panic among some attendees, humans coordinated small movements to guide the crowd, preventing chaos. Every action was deliberate, but invisible to those who did not pay close attention. The summit organizers began to notice something extraordinary. The humans' methods reduced tension, prevented conflict, and created a sense of order without intimidation. Other species, who relied on weapons and force, found their usual tactics ineffective. Aggression met calm, impatience met patience, and the result was an environment of unprecedented stability. It became clear that the humans' unarmed approach was not a weakness. It was a new form of power. A species that could control situations without weapons could prevent conflicts that others might not even realize were starting. Diplomacy became a living demonstration of human philosophy. Power does not require force, and strength is most visible when it is restrained. By the final day of the summit, alien delegates were no longer whispering in disbelief. They were watching closely, taking notes, and reconsidering centuries of assumptions about security, negotiation, and strength. The humans had demonstrated that there was a way to navigate a dangerous galaxy without relying on fear or aggression. They had proven that discipline, awareness, and psychological insight could replace weapons in ways that were both effective and unexpected. As the humans prepared to leave Valoria Prime, delegates from other systems approached cautiously. Some offered compliments tinged with skepticism. Others asked questions that revealed a deep curiosity. Every conversation carried an undercurrent of awe. The humans had changed expectations, and the galaxy was beginning to realize it. And yet, even as observers tried to understand, a deeper question lingered. If humans could achieve so much without weapons, what other abilities did they possess? What else could they do if necessary? The galaxy had only seen the surface, and the implications were both thrilling and unsettling. The Valorian summit became a turning point. Reports of human unarmed diplomacy spread across star systems, inspiring debate, admiration, and sometimes fear. Humans had not just attended a summit, they had demonstrated a philosophy that challenged the very foundation of interstellar relations. The galaxy had learned something new. There were ways to exert influence and maintain safety that did not rely on intimidation. Threat or violence, and while the unarmed humans returned home quietly, leaving alien delegates to ponder the implications, one truth was clear. The story of their methods was only beginning, and the full extent of their capabilities had yet to be revealed. After the Valorian summit, whispers about the humans did not die down. Across the galaxy, diplomats, scholars, and military leaders debated what they had seen. How could a species survive in a universe full of danger without weapons? How could they maintain order and protect their delegates without even a single visible defense? The question spread quickly, and curiosity turned into investigation. A special interstellar council convened to study the phenomenon. They gathered archives, historical records, and reports from diplomats who had traveled with humans. Slowly, a picture began to emerge, but one that still puzzled the galaxy. Humans had a long history of encountering new civilizations, and they had always behaved differently from others. Early records showed that when humans arrived armed, situations often escalated quickly. Threats were misinterpreted, and even peaceful meetings sometimes turned violent. Humans realized early on that weapons were not always protection. They could be danger themselves. The Council found evidence from decades, even centuries, of humans choosing to train their diplomatic guards in a completely new way. These guards were unarmed, but they were taught to read body language, understand motives, and anticipate actions before they happened. Every movement, every glance, every subtle reaction in a room could be noticed and interpreted. Humans had developed skills that went far beyond fighting. They could influence situations simply by being aware and calm. This discovery shocked the galaxy. Many species had never considered that restraint could be more effective than force. Their thinking was built on weapons, on power, and on intimidation. The idea that a species could achieve safety and influence without physical strength was almost unimaginable. To understand this, the Council reviewed a historical record from a time long before humans had become major players in galactic diplomacy. It told of a meeting between humans and a newly discovered alien species. The humans arrived armed, as was traditional at the time. The aliens responded in kind. Tensions rose, words became threats, and before long, a fight broke out. Several delegates were injured, and the meeting ended in chaos. From that point, humans made a conscious decision. They would no longer rely on weapons in diplomatic matters. Instead, they would create a new kind of guard, one trained not for battle, but for prevention. Their training focused on observation, psychology, and movement. Guards learned to notice tiny changes in posture, the slightest twitch in an eye, or a shift in tone of voice. They practiced ways to influence behavior without touching anyone or using weapons. The unarmed human guard became a symbol of control through understanding, not through force. The Council studied modern examples as well. Reports from the Valorian summit showed how humans had diffused potential threats before they became dangerous. The radical group that tried to breach their delegation was neutralized without violence. Humans simply positioned themselves calmly, maintained eye contact, and exuded confidence. The attackers hesitated because the humans' presence affected them. No force was needed. The humans controlled the situation with nothing but awareness and patience. Alien strategists began to understand a truth that had been invisible for centuries. Humans had discovered that the most effective form of power was subtle, invisible, and disciplined. Physical strength could be countered with equal force. Weapons could escalate conflicts. But influence, patience, and careful observation, these were almost impossible to resist. A human guard could prevent a fight before it began, making weapons irrelevant. Some aliens struggled to accept this. They were trained to believe that force was the ultimate tool. They had spent lifetimes perfecting combat skills, building weapons, and relying on intimidation. The idea that a species could operate successfully without those things seemed almost unnatural. But the evidence was undeniable. Humans had built a system that worked. The Council also discovered that humans trained their guards in simulation environments that mirrored every possible scenario. Guards practiced responding to aggression from different species, to ambushes, to threats of all kinds. They were taught to stay calm under pressure, to anticipate every possible outcome, and to adapt instantly. Even without weapons, a human guard could act faster and more effectively than an armed alien could, because their understanding of behavior gave them an advantage that no weapon could provide. It was not magic, and it was not luck. Humans had perfected the art of control. They had learned that in diplomacy, the greatest threat was misunderstanding. Weapons could never prevent that. Only awareness, discipline, and presence could. And so, every human guard carried no weapons at all. Yet they were among the most dangerous beings in the galaxy, not because they could harm others, but because they could prevent harm before it even began. The Council also noted something else. Humans did not flaunt their abilities. They did not use fear to manipulate others, nor did they claim superiority. Their approach was subtle, almost invisible, but incredibly effective. Diplomats and observers reported a strange feeling when humans were present. Tension would ease, tempers cooled, and decisions were made more rationally. The humans' mere presence shaped the behavior of everyone around them, creating order without force. This revelation caused both admiration and fear. Many alien leaders began to wonder what else humans were capable of. If they could achieve this level of control without weapons, what might they be able to do if a real threat appeared? The thought made some uneasy, as humans had never revealed the full extent of their training. Historians also noticed patterns in human history. Whenever humans faced conflict in the past, they often resolved it in ways that avoided violence. Even on their home planet, early humans had developed strategies to prevent conflict with neighbors rather than escalate it. That philosophy had carried into space, shaping the approach of every diplomatic guard ever trained. The Council began to share these findings across the galaxy, and slowly, attitudes began to shift. Some species started experimenting with similar techniques, sending smaller numbers of guards trained in observation and influence instead of relying solely on weapons. Others remained skeptical, but curiosity grew. Humans had shown that there was a new way to survive in a dangerous universe, one that relied not on domination or aggression, but on understanding and presence. In the end, the Council concluded that humans had discovered something unique. Their unarmed guards were not weak, they were powerful in ways that other species could not easily measure. They had mastered control without coercion, discipline without intimidation, and presence without fear. Their approach challenged the galaxy's assumptions about strength and security. By the time the report was circulated, humans had already moved on to other missions. They did not seek recognition or praise. They quietly continued their work, confident in their methods, knowing that the galaxy would eventually understand the significance of their philosophy. And even though much of the galaxy remained cautious, the truth was clear. Humans had created a system where diplomacy could succeed without threats. They had shown that restraint could be more dangerous than weapons, and patience more effective than aggression. In a universe that expected power to be measured in weapons and firepower, humans had introduced a new measure, the strength of understanding and the control that comes from awareness. The story of the unarmed human guards spread further, inspiring new discussions, research, and even fear. Other species realized that humans had turned the simple act of remaining unarmed into a profound demonstration of power. Their philosophy and training had redefined what it meant to be dangerous in the galaxy, not through destruction, but through presence, discipline, and perception. And though many questions remained, one thing was certain: humans were not ordinary. Their guards were not ordinary. They had revealed a truth that would change the galaxy's approach to diplomacy, security, and even the idea of strength itself. The full story of humans' unarmed power had only just begun, but its impact was already spreading across star systems. The galaxy was starting to see that humans had created something extraordinary, a way to survive, to influence, and to protect, all without lifting a weapon. The galaxy had begun to talk about humans in ways it never had before. Stories of unarmed human guards circulated across star systems, and with each telling, curiosity grew. Observers wanted to know how humans could manage diplomacy in such a dangerous universe without weapons. What was the secret behind their calm, precise, and confident presence? The answer, as it turned out, was not something that could be detected with sensors or understood through traditional means. It was skill years of training, discipline, and observation that had been refined over generations. Humans had taken the art of protection and transformed it into something almost invisible, yet incredibly effective. The truth became clear when the humans arrived at another high-stakes interstellar meeting. The venue was massive, a complex of floating platforms that hovered over a planet's surface. The atmosphere was tense. Rival species were negotiating trade agreements and territorial rights, and small conflicts had already begun to flare. The air crackled with potential aggression. The humans entered quietly, their diplomats flanked by unarmed guards. Immediately, the room reacted. Aliens glanced at each other, some whispering in disbelief. They expected the humans to be at risk, to rely on others for protection, or perhaps to show some kind of defensive technology. But the humans carried nothing, and yet there was no fear in their movement. They walked calmly, deliberately, as though the danger around them was part of the ordinary rhythm of life. Once inside, the humans began their work. Observers quickly noticed that the unarmed guards moved with precision and coordination. It was almost as if they could anticipate the flow of the room before anything happened. Delegates who had been on edge moments before suddenly found themselves pausing, adjusting their posture, and speaking more carefully. The humans were not controlling them directly. There were no commands or threats. Instead, the humans' awareness seemed to shape the environment naturally. One incident highlighted the true depth of their skill. A minor disagreement between two alien factions escalated quickly, voices rising, bodies leaning forward aggressively. Any other species' guards would have raised weapons or intervened physically. The human guards, however, did not reach for anything. They moved subtly into the path of escalation. Their positioning was precise, blocking access without appearing confrontational. Then came the unspoken part of their training. The guards' eyes and expressions communicated calm authority. Their gaze was steady, unflinching, and yet not intimidating in a hostile way. The aggressive delegates found themselves mirroring the humans' calm. Their anger softened, their posture relaxed. In minutes, the argument had cooled, and the room returned to discussion. The humans had neutralized a potentially dangerous situation without a single threat or weapon. Observers from other species began to realize something profound. The humans' unarmed guards were not passive. They were highly active, constantly analyzing, predicting, and influencing. Their skill was not in the force they could apply, but in the precision of their awareness. Every movement had purpose, every glance carried meaning, and every step was calculated to maintain safety without confrontation. Training for this level of skill was intensive. Human guards began their preparation from an early stage, learning to read countless forms of communication. They studied posture, eye movement, vocal tones, and even micro-expressions that most species never noticed. They practiced predicting actions before they occurred, training their minds to see patterns invisible to ordinary observers. But that was only part of it. Humans also trained physically, not to fight with weapons, but to move with speed, balance, and grace. They learned how to position themselves instantly to block or redirect potential threats. Their bodies became tools for control, as effective as any weapon yet completely non-lethal. By combining mental and physical training, humans created a guard system that could operate safely in any environment, against any species, without relying on violence. At the same meeting, a demonstration occurred that revealed the subtle brilliance of the humans' approach. A group of alien observers tried to provoke a reaction, stepping too close, raising their voices, and gesturing aggressively. Every other species' guards might have reacted instinctively, showing force or even striking first. The human guards did nothing of the sort. They moved slightly, adjusting their positions, subtly signaling their awareness. The aggressors found themselves subtly blocked and mirrored in movement, their energy diffused. Within moments, the provocation was neutralized. No words were exchanged, no force applied. The humans had accomplished control through presence alone. Diplomats from other species began to take notes. They watched in awe as humans turned a potentially chaotic environment into an orderly discussion. It was not magic nor technology. It was human skill, patience, and the ability to anticipate the actions of others. The humans' abilities were not limited to preventing physical conflicts. They also had a profound effect on communication. Discussions that could have turned into arguments became calmer and more productive. Delegates who were accustomed to aggressive bargaining found themselves listening more carefully, considering alternative solutions, and avoiding unnecessary confrontations. Humans had created a form of influence that went beyond mere safety. They shaped the dynamics of the room itself. For alien leaders, the realization was startling. The humans were redefining the concept of power. They were proving that strength did not always come from weapons or physical dominance. Instead, the combination of discipline, awareness, and psychological insight created a type of power that was both effective and difficult to counter. Historical records supported this observation. Humans had applied these principles for centuries, gradually refining their methods through trial, observation, and experience. Early attempts at armed protection had led to unnecessary escalation. Through trial and error, humans learned that restraint, patience, and understanding were more effective. Over time, this philosophy became a core part of human diplomacy. Every guard was trained not to fight with weapons, but to prevent violence before it could occur. The impact on the galaxy was profound. Other species began to realize that humans had introduced a new standard for diplomacy. The presence of humans forced them to reconsider their own methods. Could they maintain security without relying on intimidation? Could they achieve influence without weapons? For many, the answer was not clear, and the realization was both exciting and unnerving. Back at the meeting, the humans continued their work without fanfare. They moved as a team, anticipating each challenge and adjusting without drawing attention. Delegates noticed their calm, but could not fully explain it. Observers began to whisper about the human effect, a term that would soon spread across multiple star systems. It referred to the way humans could shape behavior, prevent conflict, and maintain control simply through presence and awareness. By the end of the summit, alien leaders were left with a mix of admiration and uncertainty. Humans had shown a level of discipline and capability that challenged centuries of assumptions about strength and security. Their unarmed guards were not weak. They were among the most capable beings any species had encountered. The skill, subtlety, and effectiveness of humans had introduced a new way of thinking about diplomacy and protection. And still, much of the galaxy did not fully understand it. Humans had revealed only part of their ability, keeping the true depth of their skill hidden. Even with careful observation, other species could not replicate what humans had achieved. The unarmed guards operated on a level that combined intuition, prediction, and psychological understanding in ways no alien species had mastered. The realization was clear. Humans had redefined the idea of power. In a universe obsessed with weapons, aggression, and intimidation, they had shown that restraint, Skill and presence could be more effective than any arsenal. Their unarmed guards were a living example of this philosophy, a symbol of control without force, an influence without violence. As humans departed from the summit, the story of their unarmed capability continued to spread. Observers shared accounts, scholars analyzed records, and military leaders speculated about the limits of human skill. The humans had introduced a new model for diplomacy, one that combined discipline, understanding, and presence into a form of power unlike anything the galaxy had seen before. The unarmed human guards had not just protected their diplomats, they had transformed expectations. They had shown that strength was not always visible, that control could exist without weapons, and that influence could be exercised through awareness and discipline. The galaxy had witnessed a new form of mastery, one that would be studied, respected, and sometimes feared for generations to come, even as humans quietly continued their work. The message was clear. True power did not need to be displayed through violence. The most dangerous beings were sometimes the ones who carried nothing at all. After years of observation, the galaxy slowly began to understand the significance of the humans' approach. Reports and stories had spread from one system to another, describing unarmed humans walking calmly into dangerous situations and emerging without incident. Scholars, diplomats, and leaders debated endlessly, trying to understand what made humans so effective. Many were still skeptical, but all agreed that something extraordinary had been witnessed. The humans themselves did not boast about their abilities. They did not claim to be superior or demand recognition. Their diplomats continued their work quietly, focusing on negotiations, agreements, and problem-solving. The unarmed guards moved with precision, always aware, always calm, ensuring the safety of their delegation without disrupting the flow of events. Their presence alone had changed the expectations of every species that encountered them. A significant turning point came during a major interstellar conference on a neutral planet. Delegates from dozens of star systems had gathered to discuss trade, borders, and political alliances. The atmosphere was tense. Many species had long-standing rivalries, and every conversation carried the risk of escalation. Weapons were common, and guards were heavily armed as usual. But the humans arrived unarmed, as always. Their diplomats walked through the grand halls calmly, flanked by their silent, disciplined guards. The reaction was immediate. Some species stared in disbelief. Others whispered to colleagues, questioning whether humans were reckless or confident. As always, the humans showed no fear, no aggression, no need to assert dominance. They simply moved through the rooms, their presence commanding respect in a subtle but undeniable way. Not an incident occurred that tested their abilities in a dramatic way. A disagreement between two rival factions quickly escalated. Voices rose, gestures became threatening, and the air buzzed with tension. All other species' guards reached for weapons instinctively, ready to intervene. The humans did not. Instead, they positioned themselves carefully, subtly guiding the movements of the delegates. Their gaze, posture, and calm confidence began to influence the room. The aggression of the rival factions softened. Within minutes, the confrontation was diffused without a single shot fired or a single physical threat applied. Observers took note. The humans' methods were not forceful, but they were undeniably effective. Their guards moved in perfect coordination, predicting potential conflicts before they occurred. Their presence alone encouraged reason, patience, and dialogue. Other species began to realize that the humans had mastered something they themselves could not replicate, the ability to maintain safety and control without relying on weapons. The implications of this approach were staggering. Across the galaxy, species began to reconsider their own reliance on force. Military leaders, diplomats, and strategists debated whether it was possible to train unarmed personnel in the way humans did. Could discipline, observation, and presence be more powerful than weapons? Could conflict truly be prevented without intimidation? These questions challenged centuries of assumptions. Reports of human diplomacy inspired admiration, curiosity, and sometimes fear. Aliens had learned to measure power in weapons, technology, and physical strength. Humans had introduced a new measure: awareness, control, and the ability to influence outcomes without aggression. It was a concept so foreign that some could not accept it. Yet the evidence was undeniable. Meanwhile, humans continued their work quietly. They negotiated treaties, mediated disputes, and facilitated trade agreements across dozens of systems. Their unarmed guards moved alongside them, never drawing attention to themselves, but always ensuring security. No attack had ever succeeded against a human delegation, and over time, the galaxy began to understand why. The humans had trained their guards to prevent threats before they existed, to anticipate behavior, and to shape the environment through calm authority. This philosophy was deeply rooted in human history. Long before humans reached the stars, they had learned through experience that restraint could be stronger than force. Violence often escalated situations instead of resolving them. By mastering awareness and patience, humans had developed a system that ensured safety while avoiding unnecessary conflict. The same philosophy now guided every human guard in the galaxy. Alien scholars began to study these methods extensively. They observed humans in action, analyzed patterns, and debated the psychological and tactical principles behind their success. The findings were revolutionary. Humans had demonstrated that power was not always visible, and that influence could be exercised without force. Their unarmed guards had become living proof of this principle, a clear demonstration that control and safety could exist without weapons. Over time, humans' reputation grew. They were respected as exceptional diplomats, capable of navigating the most dangerous situations without escalating tensions. Their presence at summits, negotiations, and high-stakes meetings became a stabilizing factor. Even species with long histories of aggression and rivalry learned to approach discussions with more caution and thoughtfulness. When humans were involved, the human approach also began to influence other species. Some began experimenting with similar training programs, focusing on observation, presence, and non-violent intervention. Others remained skeptical, but the success of humans made it difficult to ignore the possibilities. Across the galaxy, the idea that power could exist without weapons began to gain traction. Despite this growing recognition, humans remained humble. They did not seek dominance, nor did they manipulate others through fear. Their goal was always to maintain peace, ensure safety, and foster understanding. They had discovered a form of diplomacy that combined discipline, awareness, and influence in a way that no other species had mastered. Their unarmed guards were the embodiment of this philosophy, a testament to the power of restraint and presence. As time passed, humans became known not only for their diplomatic skills, but also for the philosophy they represented. Other species began to reconsider what it meant to be strong, safe, and influential. Weapons were no longer the only measure of capability. The galaxy had witnessed a new standard, one in which control, awareness, and calm authority could achieve results that force never could. At the heart of this revelation was a simple truth. Humans had proven that the greatest power sometimes lies in what is not wielded. The unarmed guards were not weak. They were among the most capable beings in the galaxy. Their skill, discipline, and presence allowed them to navigate danger with precision, neutralize threats before they arose, and influence outcomes without ever resorting to aggression. The story of humans, unarmed diplomacy, spread throughout the stars. It became a legend, inspiring debate, research, and awe. Many tried to replicate it, but few could approach the subtle mastery of the humans. They had achieved something extraordinary, a way to protect, influence, and negotiate that relied on skill, awareness, and restraint rather than force. By the end, it was clear that humans had changed the galaxy forever. They had introduced a new model for diplomacy, one that combined observation, anticipation, and presence into a form of power unlike anything previously known. Their unarmed guards were not simply protectors. They were living symbols of a philosophy that had reshaped interstellar relations. And so, as humans continued their quiet work across countless systems, the galaxy learned an unforgettable lesson. True strength did not always come from weapons or aggression. Sometimes the most dangerous beings were those who carried nothing at all, yet possessed complete control over themselves, their environment, and the situations around them. Humans had shown that power could exist in restraint, that influence could be exercised without force, and that awareness could prevent violence more effectively than any weapon. The revelation was profound. The galaxy had witnessed humans' unarmed diplomacy, and in doing so, had seen the potential for a new era, one in which understanding, patience, and presence could become the foundation of interstellar peace. Humans had arrived quietly, changed expectations forever, and left the galaxy with a lesson that would resonate for generations.